Well, it was Sunday afternoon, October the 1st, 1961. A fledgling little UHF television station called WYAH-TV, 1,000-watt transmitter, 17,000 ERP, began its first broadcast. That was a long time ago, 57 years ago to be precise. And today marks that special anniversary because today we're going to inaugurate something called the CBN News, 24-hour-a-day news channel that's going to be one more phase in this unfolding drama of CBN.
Who knew back in 1961,
well,
right?
For sure I wouldn't. You know, Terry, I was thinking when we first went on the air, we didn't have a decent monitor. Yeah. And we literally, this is a true story, there was a little convenience store down the block from us, and we used to have to run down there, have them turn their TV on to see if we were on the air. I mean, that's the honest truth. And all we did was get around the block. Now we're around the world, 59 different languages and all kinds of situations. And seeing probably each year well over 100 million people accept Jesus as Savior. It's just amazing. Who would have thought what God was going to do?
Exactly.
Terry?
Well, during this hour, we're going to go back to the day it all started and show you the amazing miracles God has done in our 57 years of ministries. Plus, well, it was supposed to be a surprise, but now he's announced it. We have an exciting new development for CBN News, but we'll tell you more about it in just a little bit, so stay tuned.
But first in the news, the FBI investigation and the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh is supposed to be over by the end of this week, and the Senate can then vote. But of course, some conservatives believe the Democrats want to try to delay the vote again, but it's not going to happen. And as a matter of fact, the prosecutor who was doing the questioning for the Republicans said there is no way that this case could have ever gone to trial because there are too many inconsistencies. Amber Strong has more on that story.
The FBI is looking to follow up into any new information when it comes to those sexual assault allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. In a surprise turn of events, Republican Senator Jeff Flake suggesting a delay to the Senate floor vote.
We ought to do what we can to make sure that we do all due diligence with
and laying the current guidelines of a one-week investigation, limited to the current and credible allegations. But some Senate Democrats say that may not be enough time. Others concerned the White House may be dictating the terms of the investigation.
I've never heard that the White House, either under this president or other presidents, is saying, well, you can't interview this person, you can't look at this time period, you can only look at these people from one side of the street.
Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says they're staying out of it.
The White House isn't intervening, we're not micromanaging this process.
But some Republicans want their own investigation into how Dr. Christine Ford's letter about Kavanaugh was leaked to the media.
I'm going to call for an investigation of what happened in this committee, who betrayed Dr. Ford's trust.
Regardless, Senate Democrats say the hearing itself gives insight into Kavanaugh's political leaning.
As I watched him, part of me thought, this is a man who believes that he did nothing wrong and he's completely unjustly accused. There were some lines that he delivered that were sharper, more partisan, more, this is the Clintons paying me back.
Flake says he empathizes with Kavanaugh's anger.
It was anger, but if I were unjustly accused, that's how I would feel as well.
Meanwhile, the Kavanaugh hearing is opening up the door to conversations about the larger issue of sexual assault from everyday citizens.
I'm a 76-year-old woman who was sexually molested in the 2nd grade. This brings back so much pain.
To the White House staff.
I'm a victim of sexual assault. I don't expect Judge Kavanaugh or Jake Tapper or Jeff Flake or anybody to be held responsible for that. You have to be responsible for your own conduct.
Someone who actually violated a woman to sit in the Supreme Court.
Many women have protested Kavanaugh. Others have stood by him, calling Senate offices in support of the judge. Now that investigation has to be wrapped up by the end of the week, but that doesn't mean it's over. House Democrats say they could launch an investigation themselves should they take the House in November. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Can you imagine somebody exposing himself to this kind of treatment? I mean, who would want to be a candidate for any government office if the Democrats are going to pull those games on him? You know, and the thing of it is, Senator Feinstein held that letter for months, absolutely for months, never let anybody know about it, then began to leak it. Then she hired lawyers for the woman who was tied into the Democrats in some fashion or other. But then they began to call, well, after she had made that disclosure, in order to stall the hearings, they said, well, we've got to have an FBI investigation. Senator Flake is key. There are only about 2 or 3 senators that are key. Susan Collins of Maine, Susan Murkowski from Alaska, and then, of course, you've got 2 or 3 Democrats, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Manchin, et cetera, who would tip the scale. The Republicans do not have enough votes. But the amazing thing, the senator from Connecticut was already calling for Kavanaugh to withdraw before those hearings even began. So their minds were already made up. It was a complete smear job. But think of somebody who's a candidate, and all of a sudden, the jokes that he made when he was a high school student in a yearbook, the little indiscretions he made when he was 15 years old are suddenly going to become national news. Who in the world would want that? And who would try to pick a leader of anything on the basis of what he did when he was 15 or 16 or 17? It doesn't make any sense at all. It's amazing nonsense. But we're embroiled in that, and the whole nation was riveted to it. But it looks as if Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed. And the question is, what will the FBI find? They're going to find exactly what the Judiciary Committee found. And there are too many consistencies. There's one thing that I think we need to discuss, that I can't discuss it. Apparently, everybody keeps quiet. There was a yearbook from Holton Arms where the accuser went to school. And there was an article in there about her, but somehow they bought up every copy of it. It's been taken off the market. I think Politico got a copy, but for some people, they won't even discuss it. I don't know what was said in there. I haven't seen it, but it's raising a great deal of suspicion because something was going on in her life that the editors of the Holton Arms yearbook wanted to put in there. And I haven't seen it. I don't know what it is, but it's amazing that they want to cover that up. But this woman was dissembled about the fact that she didn't like to fly. It turned out she flew all over everywhere, back and forth. When you call Baltimore DWI, you're not a casual traveler. I mean, you're a regular. I mean, you know, would you call Baltimore DWI?
No, understand there was also a visit to Hawaii. You can't drive there.
You really can't drive. Last time I heard, there's no way of driving.
Yep.
But she said, well, and apparently the Senate committee said, well, we will come all the way out to California and interview you. But somehow that word didn't reach her or her attorneys. And these inconsistencies filled this whole thing. A lot of dissembling. But nevertheless, right now, the FBI is going to check stuff out. Hopefully, they'll have a vote by Friday. It could be if Mitch McConnell wants to move the thing along. But right now, the Supreme Court is locked in on a tie. They need another judge in there to get a majority. They don't have one. So it's holding up the process. Well, in other news, a major victory for President Trump. The U.S. has negotiated a new trade deal with Canada and Mexico to replace what he considered the flawed NAFTA. Ephraim Graham has that.
Pat, the new deal will not be called NAFTA. It's known as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. The deal will replace the nearly 25-year-old deal between the 3 countries. It was announced Sunday night. The plan covers a range of trade topics, including dairy imports, the possibility of U.S. tariff on cars, intellectual property, and much more. Trump administration officials believe it will make the U.S. economy stronger. Congress will not vote on the deal until next year, and there could be a difficult fight on Capitol Hill before the agreement is finally passed. The death toll in Indonesia is now more than 840 as rescue workers are continuing to search for people trapped under rubble after a tsunami struck Friday following a 7.5 magnitude earthquake. In addition to the hundreds dead, thousands remain homeless. The natural disaster hit the central Sulawesi island in Indonesia, and thousands of residents are now crowding airports, hoping to get out on evacuation flights. Indonesia's president says the government is looking to get more food and fuel as soon as possible. CBN will be sending disaster relief teams to aid the victims of the terrible tragedy. Pat?
In that last horrible tsunami that hit, Operation Blessing had a ship loaded with supplies that landed in Banda Aceh, which is the center of the tsunami problem, within hours or days of the tragedy. And we were on the scene and we wanted to help people. And sure, they were Muslim, but we were Christian. It didn't matter because we cared for them. Now, that's once again, it's in that so-called Ring of Fire. You've probably seen it, and we can maybe have a picture of it. There it is. You see, all around, the Pacific plate is moving against the North American plate and other plates. And it's an unstable geological area. And there's Indonesia right at the center, but it starts down in New Zealand. And they say, I read one article that's very well written about what they call the Cascadia region out near Oregon. The fact that there's a very possibility that there's a plate there that could shift and cause some massive tsunami into Oregon. I don't know if that's the case, but all the way, we had a big one down in Chile. We have others in Central America and up around the Aleutians and that whole area, the Ring of Fire, and it's unstable. And you can see there in Acapulco, there's Lima, and all the way down into South America. But up around Seattle, San Francisco, that part of the United States is very vulnerable as that Pacific plate begins to shift. So those tsunamis are horrible. There's a terrible earthquake out in the middle of the ocean, and then suddenly these tsunami waves begin to roll over the countries. Some years ago on this program, I was following up Dale Hurd's piece about the way that the dictator of Venezuela had taken power. And he had said something about, well, I think they're going to, try to assassinate me. And I made a comment, well, maybe they ought to go ahead and do it. Well, that caused a furor all around the world. Isn't that a monstrous thing to say? And isn't that terrible? And this broadcaster calls on the assassination of a duly elected president. Well, he wasn't a duly elected. He'd gotten his power by a coup against the military in Venezuela. But, all right, Chavez, the then dictator, is dead. But his successor is a man named Maduro, who apparently was a cab driver or taxi driver or something. He has ruined the country. It is unbelievable how one human being could destroy one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It has one of the largest deposits of petroleum of any nation on the face of the earth. And now, what are we going to do about it? The United States really is so afraid of being called the nasty Yankee that they don't want to come in and do something. But the Organization of American States needs to move on that. It's a humanitarian crisis of major proportion. Ephraim Graham has more.
Well, Pat, the country's massive economic, social problems are taking a heavy toll on the country's health services, and the situation in the country's hospitals is heartbreaking. Dale Hurd has the story.
Venezuela's economic meltdown has taken a terrible toll on the nation's health services. And in Venezuelan hospitals, the situation is especially heartbreaking. At San Cristobal Hospital in Táchira State, only emergency cases are being admitted, and people have to buy their own medicines, bandages, and gloves. Some patients are forced to wait in stairwells for treatment that is not coming. This patient, Gloria, needs a metal pin for her leg, but she may wait up to 3 months. Because of a shortage of nurses, many patients in the hospital are being cared for by their relatives. Many of the medical personnel have left the hospital because they were unable to survive on the minimum wage they were getting, and those who are left are working for almost nothing.
Everything here is so sad. I can not help them because they need help. There is nobody here.
The hospital is almost bankrupt by the worsening economic situation in Venezuela, and parts have had to be boarded up due to lack of supplies. This 7-year-old patient has a brain tumor. There is no cancer treatment available in the country, and she is cared for by her mother, who says, "Because she's my daughter, I have to support her and do everything I can to help her. We've been here for 2 months." This boy needs antibiotics for a serious bowel problem, but they simply aren't available. His father describes the situation as a nightmare. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Heartbreaking indeed. Japan's space agency is releasing unusual photos from space from the surface of an asteroid. The photos from 2 jumping robotic rovers show the rocky surface of the asteroid about 170 million miles away. It took more than 3 years for the probe to reach the vicinity of the asteroid. A little over a week ago, it dropped a small capsule with 2 rovers onto its surface. The rovers don't have any wheels. They jump around. Later on, the main probe will land on the asteroid, collect a sample, and then bring it back to Earth. That should happen late in the year 2020. Pat?
Thank you very much. You know, there is more junk out in space. There are all kinds of rocks going around there. There really are. And the Lord in his graciousness has kept us safe. And fortunately, there's a great big planet in the solar system named Jupiter that can suck some of these things into its orbit because it has a much more powerful magnetic field than Earth does. But were it not for that, we are vulnerable. And I wrote a book called The End of the Age, and it seems like to me the thing that will fulfill the prophecies that Jesus Christ made in the Bible when he says, except those days would be shortened, there'll be nobody alive on the face of the earth. I think an asteroid hit, they call them extinctors. Mine was 0.6 of a mile, 1 kilometer in diameter, and the amount of damage was just extraordinary because I figured out and got the dimensions of this thing and the power. They are extraordinarily damaging. And if a big one hits, life as we know it on Earth won't exist anymore. So if you ever realize that we're dependent on the Lord, every day we walk the face of this glorious earth that's here. And I think it's time to always praise God and recognize that were it not for the grace of God, we'd be blown up like some of these other stars up in the light. But thank God that he's protected this earth so far. But these asteroids are out there, and we just, right now, we haven't gotten the technology that's needed, and they're experimenting, but there's not enough money being spent to figure out what to do. But I wish they would work on it because that's a very serious thing facing us.